my opposer when I want freedom. You my opposer when I want justice. You my opposer when I want equality.
Robinson gives us a great window into what you can do with that fame and celebrity to affect change across the country.
Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet?
We wanted any girl born in the world. If she is good enough, there's a place for her to play and make a living.
LeBron James took the court for warm-ups in this t-shirt bearing the words, "I can't breathe."
His action to sit was later lifted to taking a knee.
Baseball is behind. Only 9% of people say it's their favorite sport, the lowest point ever. Attendance continues to dwindle. Stadiums have become increasingly empty. Serious problems. However, nothing is more serious than this. The Hall of Fame and Curt Flood. Dad was blackballed, plain and simple, said Scott, Curt's youngest son. But why? A special ball player with 2 World Series rings, 7 Gold Gloves. Flood dazzled in center, but his greatest achievement was challenging the status quo of Major League Baseball. Curt Flood, like many other players, signed the Uniform Players Contract, which features paragraph 10A, the reserve clause, bounding players to their respective teams, in essence owned by those teams. Tim McCarver said it was like they were cattle or pigs. Some players were sold for straight cash. Players were viewed as the lesser. So when Flood was traded from the Cardinals to the Phillies, he wrote the commissioner, "After 12 years in the major leagues, I do not feel that I am a piece of property to be bought and sold irrespective of my wishes."
It almost didn't matter what I said. I realized that this is really a man of principle here.
That is Marvin Miller, former executive with the MLB Players Association. Flood filed a lawsuit against Major League Baseball declaring he become a free agent and the 24 other teams be allowed to bid for his services. The commissioner vehemently refused.
This is America, and I'm a human being. I'm not a piece of property.
The baseball press went after Flood. Without the clause, Major League Baseball would be dead. The owners need protection.
A man who makes $90,000 a year.
A well-paid slave is nonetheless a slave.
Cartoons were plastered all over the newspapers. Still, Flood said it's the players who are baseball. He got 4 or 5 death threats a day, said fellow teammate and Hoffer, Bob Gibson. The support from fellow players was tragic. Hank Aaron did not stand up for him, nor did Willie Mays, Carl Yastrzemski, Harmon Killebrew. Ron Santo second-guessed the union for supporting him. Joe DiMaggio, Ted Williams, and Bob Feller said he was wrong. It was known. You challenge the establishment, your career's over. Thus, no active ball player testifying on his behalf, nor did any of them even come to the court and sit in the gallery. Only former big leaguers would testify. It speaks to the lack of unity. Former Supreme Court Justice Arthur Goldberg took Flood's case pro bono. In the courtroom, one of the most dramatic moments of the trial occurred when Jackie Robinson, whose health was declining because of diabetes, walked to the front of the courtroom using a cane. While holding out, Flood was traded to the Senators. He needed the money and signed a deal with Washington, reserve clause intact. Soon thereafter, the Supreme Court vowed to hear his case.
Just when baseball owners thought it was safe to go back into the courts, they met a shark in Marvin Miller, the players' union chief who finally took down baseball's reserve clause 96 years after National League owners created it to keep down salaries.
And that's when Goldberg, the former justice, froze. The Times wrote, Goldberg had one of the worst days of his career. He lost his place. He did not answer justices' questions directly. He clumsily listed Flood's season-by-season batting averages. He went past his allotted time. He repeated himself. The Supreme Court was conservative, led by Richard Nixon's appointees. The final ruling was controversial. Judge Lewis Powell, who was sympathetic to Flood, withdrew from the case because of what he called a conflict of interest. He owned stock in Anheuser-Busch, whose principal owner, Augie, owned the St. Louis Cardinals. If Powell had remained, Flood could have won a 5-4 decision, but his withdrawal, combined with Chief Justice Warren Berger, who is also a Nixon appointee, 11th hour switch from Flood's side to baseballs, killed Flood's case. Instead, they came to a 5-3 ruling against Curt Flood. It was tragic. He had lost and left the United States to escape. Finally, in 1976, when pitchers Andy Messersmith and Dave McNally agreed to play a season without a contract, arbitrator Peter Seitz ruled them free agents. Overnight, the system that Miller called feudal, the one that had ruled baseball virtually since its professional organs, collapsed. Curt Flood made the fans and the press aware. He forced change by being the target. Yet the same hierarchy of baseball who threw him out still will not allow re-entry. It was an important moment in time because it was the precursor to all the events that took place in the 1970s that brought free agency to baseball, said Bud Selig. But how about the Hall, Bud? I've got to think about that, he said, but it's a fair question. You know who doesn't? Bryce Harper, Manny Machado, Alex Rodriguez. The list is countless. The players were empowered by a man the very league that employs them deemed powerless. He was an activist. He represented what all players want, a choice, not enslavement to one single team. A debt is owed. It has been a long, long time coming. Right your wrongs, Major League Baseball. Induct Curt Flood into Cooperstown.